Well, we're here live, and it's not beautiful downtown Burbank, but pretty darn close, surrounded by fire, as usual here during fire season in LA. Um, what can you say? Sometimes there's no water to put out the fires. There are big oceans nearby. Welcome to What's Up with Lord Buckley. I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time with Larry Charles, and we're going to talk about his new book, Comedy Samurai, shown here in an actual book form. Um, this is the greatest Hollywood memoir I've ever read, and I think, this knocks out of first place the previous leader in this category. I'm addicted to Hollywood memoirs. The leader up until Larry Charles was Rose McGowan's. And I like when the author does the audiobook. I not only bought the book, I also bought the audiobook because Larry was reading it. And I love when the author reads a Hollywood memoir in their own voice. Of course, this is not for everybody. It is a brutally inside look at Hollywood, a brutally inside look at his own life, a brutally honest, uh, unbelievably honest look at his own life, and inside stories for junkies like me who couldn't turn the pages fast enough. I read it twice and listened to the audiobook once, but we'll get to that when Larry gets here. Give me 5 minutes to sell some of this product, and then we'll bring on Larry Charles. I have a million questions for him. Apparently, a couple of overlaps in our lives, I'm sure. But I just want to bring on the sponsor for today's show, which is Biltong. This Biltong USA product, which you see here on the bottom, is apparently so delicious that I can't stop eating it. It's kind of like gourmet beef jerky. It tastes like filleted steak. And I just throw it in the microwave for about 5 seconds to get the stiffness out of it. But man, I've been eating this thing like a cocaine addict. And it's made by a guy down in Texas, in Prairie, Texas, I believe, who's from South Africa, who moved here a couple of years ago, Anton, king of all Biltong. And he's been sending me a couple of packages of this a week. And now I am in rehab for Biltong out in Malibu, where I'm broadcasting right now. It's highly addictive. There's many different kinds. I didn't know anything about it. Apparently, I don't even know if it's kosher, but I'll ask Larry, who used to be a Moyle himself. So maybe he's got some insight into whether Biltong is kosher or not. I don't know. Sometimes it's got that little sticker on there on the bottom. But who knows if they ever got a rabbi in South Africa to bless or examine this crap. But it's highly delicious. You get 10% off for reasons I can't even explain if you use that code Mark G. The guy gives you 10% off. He ships it to you with a bag of ice. You can use the ice later for camping or whatever you want to do with the ice. One of those pouches. But he's also got other stuff on there. There's cookies on there. I don't think it's made out of Biltong, the cookies. I haven't eaten them yet. And there's all kinds of chocolate and everything else. Coffee, which I'll get to at the end of the show. But this Biltong USA guy is killing it. It's all over the country. What is Biltong? I didn't even know what the hell Biltong was until a couple of months ago. It's a air-dried cured meat originated in South Africa, where I'm sure Larry Charles did some dangerous comedy episodes down there while the crew was eating Biltong, but we'll get into that. Various types of meat are used to produce it, ranging from beef to game meats, such as ostrich or kudu, whatever kudu is. The cut may also vary, being either fillets, which is what this is. Okay, so check this out. There is this peri peri one, which I'm not a big fan of, which is kind of spicy. That's not my favorite. But this Wagyu one here is absolutely delicious. You can choose some, like, I don't know, he's got all different kinds there that he's been sending me. But this is my favorite so far, which is what I highly recommend. So if you're going to order, try it. Use the code. If you don't like it, you never have to do it again. The guy's raising 5 kids in Texas. I don't know how he's doing that. Somehow he snuck out of South Africa in the middle of the night, carrying all of his biltong on his back. The word biltong, as I've come to learn, is a combination of bill, meaning buttock, and strip or tongue. So it's ass meets tongue. And I know Larry would love to try this someday. And we're going to bring him onto the show now, and he can answer some of the questions. If you want to stick around later after the show, after we interview him, maybe we'll get Larry to stick around for some super chats. Larry Charles, how's it going, bro?
Hey, man, how are you?
Finally, I get to meet you. I feel like I've known you for years.
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind words about the memoir. I can't believe it. And also the good words about Biltong. I mean, for God's sakes, those people must be thrilled at your endorsement.
Well, I mean, I kind of got hooked on it. So I reached out to the guy in Texas. I've never met the guy, but he is a fan of the show, and he loves the fact that I'm plugging his stuff. As for your book, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, how does ice cream and chocolate work into the Biltong philosophy?
I have no idea, but it's on the menu, and I hope he sends me the chocolate and some of the desserts, because, as you know, with our people, it's more about cake and cookies, Larry, than it is about Biltong and other addictive products.
Yes, I agree with that. Pastry
is our. You ever have a Charlotte Russe in Coney Island?
I've had a Charlotte Russe once somewhere, but I don't remember anything about it, quite frankly. I'm a man of very simple tastes, you know.
Right. That sounds like something out of a movie. Some of your lines. I have so many questions to ask you out of the book, and like I said, I love this freaking book, and I hate everything. But the genres that I like are biographies, and specifically, Hollywood memoirs. And usually in Hollywood memoirs, it's never revealing. It's always their wife gets cancer and dies, or they have to overcome some incredible hurdle. There's some insights and some celebrity name dropping, but nothing like your book. I mean, your book, is like the nuclear bomb version of Hollywood memoirs. Absolutely riveting, Larry. I swear, no, Emmis, the truth. Emmis.
Man, I'm completely blown away by your accolades. I'm very moved. Thank you.
I could not put it down. I put it down for a month after I read it. I went back last week, reread it, listened to the audiobook. Now, keep in mind, this may not be for everybody. For people who are here, your description of coming out here in Hollywood and driving around the middle of the night, with a Thomas guide, I presume, trying to find out where you're going. Yes. I could feel it. And then you and Jerry racing up and down the Laurel Canyon, I presume, in your
yes.
sports cars.
Yes.
Wow.
All true. All absolutely true. And I wrote it myself, which I think is one of the things that separates my memoir from many of the Hollywood memoirs, which are often ghostwritten by somebody else, and they are therefore controlling the narrative. But I wanted to sort of be completely forthcoming and candid, and it's difficult. That was hard to do, but that was my goal. So I'm really glad that you responded the way you did.
Yeah, look, I'm not an expert on the subject. Like anybody else, I'm a fan of pop culture, and I've been a writer out here, and I worked for MTV Magazine. I created. I worked for National Lampoon, but unlike you came out of the womb running to get out here, Larry. I 18 years old. Yeah, right, Larry?
Yeah. Well, again, my father was a failed comedian. That's where it really starts.
Okay, tell me about your father, because I really don't understand this act. He's Psycho the neurotic. Explain yes. Psy. Is it S-Y?
S-Y-C-O-E, the exotic neurotic.
Right.
He was in World War II, the occupation forces, and he started doing some stand-up like in Nagasaki or Hiroshima, wherever he was stationed, which is all bizarre and surreal to begin with. Came back, and on the GI Bill, rather than buy a house like a lot of people did, he went to the American Academy of the Dramatic Arts. He used the money for drama school, and Jason Robards was his teacher.
What?
And yeah. And so
wow.
When I was a little kid, we would go if Jason Robards was doing a show in New York, we would go backstage and visit him and hang out with him. And so I was always around it, Wow. He also, a lot of the guys from his drama school stayed in show business, even though they didn't become actors. So he was friends with the stage manager of the Ed Sullivan Show. And we would go to the Ed Sullivan Show rehearsals. he would always drag me along to these things, by the way. That's how I got.
Were you excited to go, or?
I loved it. I
Of
loved it.
course. Fucking hey, bro.
And not only that, he was very into the, the celebrities and the glitz and the glamour. But when I went to the Ed Sullivan Show or the Kraft Music Hall, he had a friend who was a lighting director there. I would see how these TV shows were put together. And as a little kid, and I was fascinated by that also, because I was such a TV addict that I would you only see what's on the frame, and seeing, oh, wow, there's 100 people working on this to make this thing that you watch on TV. I found that very fascinating also. So I was immersed in it long before, like the way a football coach's son is on the field. When
That's a good analogy. Yeah, it's a good analogy.
But you around it a lot. Yeah, I was around
You also said your father was competitive with you, like he was a bitter ball or something about your success.
Yeah. Sadly enough, when I started to have some success, he kind of he never encouraged me, really. He was like, I was his audience. And once I stopped being his audience, I mean, he was on all the time.
Right.
He had tons of shtick that he did for years and years and years until I knew them myself, but once I started to really kind of make something of myself, he kind of checked out a lot. And I usually illustrate this by telling you that when I won an Emmy for writing on Seinfeld, he called me, but not to congratulate me. His words were, "Wow, you look fat."
My! Well, then you described also that he came out to get a picture of Seinfeld.
Oh yeah. I mean,
that's hysterical.
Yeah, he came out to. He came out finally. I was already married. I had kids. I was working on Seinfeld, and he came out finally to visit us, which he never did. Right. But he made this exception, and he came out. And from the time he came out, he said, "Look, I got to get a picture with Jerry." And I was like, "Dad, I don't do that kind of stuff. I don't like asking for favors. I'm just not that way. I don't want to owe anybody anything. I want everything to be clean." And every day for the week that he was here, he would say, "Come on, take me to work. Get me a picture with Seinfeld." And I go, "No, I'm not doing it." And the whole week went by until Friday, and he was relentless. And finally he said, "Come on, take me in. Get me a picture with Jerry, please. I'm begging you." And I finally relented. I felt guilty. And I took him into the office at Radford in Studio City. And, I went up to Jerry. I'm with my father. He's got a camera. And I go up to Jerry and I go, "Jerry, it's my dad." And Jerry's so gracious. He's like, "Of course. Of course. Go outside. We'll take a picture, And we have the writer's assistant take a picture. And as they're taking the picture, Jerry goes, "Wait, Larry, get in the picture with us, And he takes the picture of the three of us. And then my father says, "Look, would it be okay if I just get a picture with me and Jerry alone?" And so I step out of the picture. He takes the picture with Jerry and himself alone. And then about a year later, I was in New York and I went to visit him in his apartment. And sure enough, there on the mantle is a picture of him and Jerry. The picture of them alone. I'm not in the picture. So that's very typical of my father. He was not a tremendously supportive person,
Right. I mean, the story, we'll get to it in a little while, but the story about your mother and her passing with her, I guess, her boyfriend, the car accident, I mean, that really touched me, Larry. That was a crazy emotional roller coaster ride. I guess, when did your parents get divorced, if they did?
They got divorced when I was about, I guess, 13 or 14, like after my bar mitzvah.
Right.
Like around, I guess, I don't know, 8th grade or 9th grade. I don't know when they exactly got legally divorced, but they separated around that time. And by 10th grade, we moved to Florida. So we left Brooklyn and I finished high school in Florida, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's odd. Okay.
Yeah. So I was lucky. I was really depressed about leaving Brooklyn at that point.
No kidding.
I had met a lot of great kids in 10th grade who were really cultural, turning me on to all kinds of cool stuff.
Right.
And then I moved to Florida, which I thought would be a cultural wasteland. But my high school in Florida was kind of an experimental high school for some reason. And the theater department was really hopping. And I got involved in theater. And there was a kid there named Adam Leslie. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was a comedian. And he was working professionally as a comedian at 16 years old. So he was like the star of the high school.
Wait. What town was this in Florida?
North Miami Beach.
Oh, North Miami Beach. Okay, well, my friend Stephen Gibb lives in North Miami Beach.
Yeah, yeah.
Barry Gibb's son. But in fact, I did know Adam Leslie, and I knew his brother John Leslie.
Right,
Uh,
right, right.
I
Exactly.
knew both those guys. I went to John Leslie's wedding. I was. Here's a picture of Adam. I
Right.
mean,
That's
this.
Adam.
Yeah, this is. I remember seeing Adam doing stand up. I remember trying to take a pipe out of Adam's mouth. I remember trying to help Adam
Yeah.
at the end, Larry.
A lot of people did.
Like
Yes.
a lot of people did. I was much more successful with his brother,
Yeah.
who is still alive, I presume. And
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, I went to his wedding in West Covina. I was the only white man at an all Mexican wedding. He was marrying a Latina,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I was representing him, I guess. But yeah, I knew Adam as well as I could be expected, based on his lifestyle. But
He was a
uh,
very charismatic kid in high school. He had chest hair and he had like beard, and he was doing
wow.
stand up, and his father was a stand up also, which you may know.
Okay, explain this to me because I remember the John telling me about his father's act, the Leslie Brothers.
Right,
They
correct. The
were doing
Leslie
like
Brothers.
rock and roll records, Lan?
They did novelty records. They
Novelty
did,
records.
they had a song called Rudy Tooty Rudy, or I don't remember what the hell the name of it is, but you can find it on YouTube actually. And his father was a bitter, nasty alcoholic who terrorized Adam as a kid.
Yikes.
And I made a movie about Adam. Unfortunately, it's only 37 minutes
I've
because
watched it. It's great. I mean, I want to put
yeah,
a link. We'll put a link up after the show where people in
yeah,
the audience could
people
find
will
it.
enjoy it. Yeah.
Fantastic movie.
Yeah.
Fantastic movie.
He died before I really finished it, but the version that's out kind of gives you a real taste of
Yeah.
the kind of abuse that he went through, and also he's very unashamed about talking about his own failures, and he was like, the first time I met him was he was on stage at a coffee house at the high school, and he did a routine that was so well developed for a 16-year-old. It was a parody of Elvis Presley movies. And he did all the impressions of all the characters, including Elvis. It was so well done that I was blown away. I was like, wow, this guy's a genius,
Wow.
Then, about a year later, I was watching, I don't know, maybe The Tonight Show or something, and Jay Leno comes out and he does the same routine. And I'm going,
Oh,
holy,
boy.
Jay Leno stole Adam's.
I knew you were going to say that. Oh, fuck.
And I went to Adam and I said, wow, man, you're not going to believe this. I saw Jay Leno last night. He did your bit. And that's when he said to me, well, actually, I stole his bit.
Oh,
and
no.
That's when I learned that Adam was a thief,
right.
both of material and also of material goods.
Wow.
He was a shoplifter. He was like a total criminal.
Okay, he told me these stories. He'd get off a cruise ship, a comedy cruise ship, go right to the record store, steal everything, and run back onto the cruise ship.
Yeah. He was really notoriously
notorious.
He couldn't control it really. I think he was more thrilled by his criminal activities than he was. He was a very lazy stand-up, but he was a very industrious criminal.
Great criminal. He told me how he would, get in a cab and say, take me to Martin Luther King Boulevard to an ATM machine in any urban city that he ever landed in to buy crack. Right, Larry?
Yeah, that was his thing. Take me to Martin Luther King Boulevard because he knew there would be crack within a block or two of that neighborhood. So that was.
Now, you once described your childhood profession as saying you and your friends were schemers. What did you mean by that?
Well, for instance, my friends would go to Madison Square Garden to see rock concerts, but they would never pay. And so what they would do is they found an usher who would take $1 and just look the other way, and you would be in.
Right.
And so I started doing that also. And sometimes even like you could take a piece of a plastic cup and just give it to them because it was such a rush of people going in. They couldn't stop everybody. And
dude, I got into the concert for Bangladesh by saying we lost our tickets. The guy wrote us a pass, and we added 2 additional names on there that we then scalped. 2 names on a piece of paper, Larry.
It wasn't really that hard to get into the garden at that time. Security, there was no real security. And then my friends also would start selling what we called beat drugs, fake drugs, basically. And so
Ooh.
they would go, and Adam taught me how to do this also, by the way. You go to the drugstore, you buy cold capsules, and you'd say they were THC, and you'd sell those, or you'd sell fake acid, and the placebo effect was so powerful that you would think, oh, well, this guy's coming back, who I sold drugs to, he's going to kick my ass. But no, they wanted more.
They thought they were high. They believed they were high.
They were high. So you learned a lot about human nature also. So
wow, psychologist, drug psychologist, you and Adam.
Yeah. So
now, wait a second. Now you go on the road with him to LA, Larry, from Florida, or
first I went to I went from Florida. I went to New York and actually got a job. I had written for Screw Magazine, which is amazing. I wrote freelance humor as a teenager for Screw Magazine, and I actually sold a few pieces. And with that in my resume, I was able to get a job selling porno novels, not selling them, but writing them for a company in New York. Where you go in, it was like a factory. They'd have like 20 writers at typewriters. The typewriters were connected to the printing press, and you'd have to put out a novel a week. And
sounds like something out of Terry Gilliam's Brazil or something.
It looked like that.
Larry, it sounds insane.
It looked like that. And I was a really bad typist. So if you made mistakes, you had to proofread it yourself and then take a razor blade. This was the technology at the time.
Oh my God.
Cut out the mistaken words, and they would often be an A or the. So you're cutting out little words, and by the end of the day, my hands would be bleeding.
From the X-Acto knife?
An X-Acto knife, exactly. Yeah. And so you had to fix it that way. And I couldn't do it for very long. It wasn't, I got docked for like taking too much time to write the porno novels. So while I was doing that, I spoke to Adam, and he was on the road with a pop band, like in the South, doing like Ramada Inns in Baton Rouge. And he said, why don't you just come down and like, we'll be a team, you know, and we'll open for this pop band. And so I did that. I left, and I met him in Baton Rouge, and we wound up being a comedy team and traveled through the South wearing foam green tuxedos, like in these kind of lounges, basically, in New Orleans and Baton Rouge and Peoria, Illinois, all these kind of weird places.
Wow. Well, Ratso and I we did the world's largest toga party at Tulane one time for Lampoon. And we did an intro to it as two live Jews, these rappers from New York who were Hasidic Jewish rappers. And all we had was a sea of mouths open from these Southern kids just looking at us from another planet.
Right.
So I don't know how your act went over down there, but
well, again, I didn't realize. I was so naive, Mark, seriously, that I thought that the material that we learned, that he taught me, was material that he'd had. But then I realized, oh, wait a minute, this is Cheech and Chong. This is, it was like he was like taking it from everywhere. And so we did really well because it was very good material, Right. And then one night in New Orleans, the first night we played a place called Dillinger's in New Orleans, which is in Fat City. Yeah. And we got on stage, and it was like a Monday night. That was when we opened, and there was only one guy at the bar. There was nobody else there. So we got up on stage, and we just sort of fucked off. And he had a trumpet, and he was playing When the Saints Come Marching In, and we were like sort of being like Martin and Lewis, like no act. Yeah. And when it was over, the band leader came up to us and said, "You're fired." And we were like, "Why?" And he was like, "There was nobody in the audience. There was just that one guy." And it's like, yeah, that one guy owns the club, And so he fired us. And so we were out on the streets in like Bourbon Street, kind of like figuring out what we were going to do. But eventually they gave us a second chance, and we went back. And worked there. And then eventually we got into a fight with the band leader in Peoria on stage at this place called I think it was called the Palladium or the Coliseum or something like that. And it was all bikers. Right. It was a big biker place, and they loved us. But we got into a fight. The head of the band leader was like a Charles Manson kind of character, and his band was like in his cult. they were all like in this sort of trance.
This is, you have to write a second memoir, Larry, because
I wrote it already. The original book was
okay.
1,000 pages.
All right, you got to chop it up to 2 books, Larry.
Yeah, it's 2 books. It's ready to go. The second book is ready to go.
I love this. I love this. Now,
So,
hey, did Goldstein ever take you to Big Wong's? He used to come by Lampoon in his limo and take the editors. We'd go to Big Wong's in Chinatown.
no, I didn't have much of a relationship. I would just say hello to him. I mostly dealt with this guy, Peter Brennan, who was the editor. He was kind of floating around, Al, and I got to meet him a few times, but I didn't really hang out with him.
Did you ever try to work for Hustler or anything out here?
I did. I worked for Chic magazine. I worked for the Larry Flint publications.
Right.
Wrote a few, because he had a lot of magazines at one time.
Yeah.
And I wrote for, in fact, Darrow Igus, the comedian that recommended me to Fridays. His wife was an editor of Chic magazine.
Wow.
And I wrote freelance humor for Chic, but eventually Darrow was the one that actually recommended me to Fridays. So they were very
Chic. I loved We. We was a good magazine.
We was good, and there was Swank.
Swank was a little more gritty, but We was kind of classy, Larry, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't have any, prejudice when it came to that stuff. If they would buy the humor, I was happy to sell it to them,
Okay, so you come out here and there's a description of you driving around with 30 or 40 scripts in the back of your VW Bug, and you would descend on any celebrity that you encountered like a mad dog and run out and get them with one of your scripts.
Yes.
I mean, how many specs did you write, and where did you write them, and when did you write them?
First of all, I didn't have a typewriter for a lot of this time, so I wrote a lot of scripts handwritten. But I would get them typed. I would go to, there was a place in Santa Monica Boulevard called Barbara's Place, and I would use my parking valet money or my bellhop money to get the scripts copied to make them look professional,
Right.
And so I used to carry them in the back of the Volkswagen. And my father used to always, in Manhattan, if he saw a celebrity, if he saw Tom Poston, he would stop him and just like start to talk to him and like try to connect with him. And so I learned how to sort of, get over my fear of that and just approach people. So I was in Dalton's on Hollywood Boulevard. That was a bookstore at that time. And I saw Richard Dreyfuss there, who was a big star at that time. And he was looking at some books. And I was like, oh, Richard Dreyfuss would be perfect for this script that I have. I ran out to the car, got the script, and I was like, I had like really long, greasy hair and a long beard, and I had like a ripped leather jacket, and I looked like a relative, and sunglasses, pretty scary looking person, I guess. And he was a small, diminutive sort of fellow, and I'm about 6'1", and so I loomed over him like that.
Oh, and that's intimidating.
I was so excited that I started hyperventilating, and I'm like, I'm breathing like, oh, Mr. Dreyfuss, I have a script. And he started freaking out, and he like actually ran away from me,
Right.
And I used that scene in a Seinfeld.
I was just going to say, go ahead. Yeah.
When Kramer goes out to California, he accosts Fred Savage, and that's basically exactly.
Dude, that's such a great scene, Larry. That's, of course, people are talking who don't know what Larry's talking about. It's part 1 and 2 of The Trip, which I think is the beginning of season 4, Larry.
Maybe the end of season. I can't remember now. It came on during the Olympics, which is
right. And he's out here as a serial killer, being stalked by 2 wonderful Dragnet-esque cops who were just absolute. The casting of those 2 guys, Larry, is worth the price of the sketch.
Yeah.
I mean, not to be to undermine the casting of Bookman in Lieutenant Bookman.
Also good. Very good.
Philip Baker Hall, one of the great opportunities of all time. For, I guess it was Tropic of Cancer. At one point, which is very rare in sitcoms, that somebody would mention Abby Hoffman in a sitcom, but it's apparently your signature was all over that episode, Larry.
Yeah. You mentioned the Trip 1 and 2, which is where Kramer goes to California, and it's like, to me that was like Day of the Locust, like a modern Day of the Locust sitcom, because it was all the underbelly of Hollywood, that Kramer obviously had immersed himself in. Yeah. So yeah, I was very into that kind of stuff. That's one of the unique things about Seinfeld was when we were drawing on sources that were not sitcom sources, not even comedy sources sometimes.
Right. Well, so I remember the Joe Davola one with the clown,
Right.
and Jerry has a thing in front of town hall where he rips up money, and it right out of Abbott and Costello, Larry. Don't try to
Yes.
deny it.
Yeah, no doubt. Abbott and Costello was probably, for me, Jerry and I and Larry Miller
I love
did
Larry Miller.
a thing when Abbott and Costello episodes were bought by Comedy Central or whatever it was called at that time, and we did the wraparound for all of them, and at Bud Abbott's house in Studio City. And we talked about the importance of Abbott and Costello to us, the TV show, more than the movie, because that was on Channel 11 in New York constantly.
Every day, right?
Every day. And
what do you think Officer Joe Bolton did in his downtime when he wasn't introducing the Stooges? Was he a corrupt cop, Larry?
I think the one of those commissions finally broke him.
They broke him down, right? The NAP commission finally got to him with Serpico. Serpico took down Officer Joe Bolton.
Serpico took down Officer Joe Bolton. No, those guys actually were announcers on the station. They did the voiceover announcing, like the news is next.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Right. Also, Captain Jack McCarthy.
Captain Jack also. They were both.
6 bells and all's well.
Yes, 6 bells and all is well. Exactly. That was, those guys were the announcers, and they gave them these little outfits. And Chuck McCann had a Sunday morning show
Chuck
that I
McCann,
loved.
right?
Yeah, really great. And then I got to meet him out here, which was one of the biggest thrills because he was like the biggest star to me, Chuck McCann. He was such an amazing talent,
Well, nobody's bigger than Chuck McCann at that age. I mean,
no, he was big. And Abbott Costello was like a Beckett, like if Beckett had done a sitcom. That's what it was like. These two weird, sad guys living together in this room. Nothing was ever going to happen to them. They had this annoying, landlord that was always on their case in the rooming house. It was like very.
You're talking about Sidney Fields now. I mean,
Sidney Fields, and it was a very bleak show in a lot of ways.
Like
I felt the bleakness even when I was a kid. They're like older guys, and they're getting slapped around and stuff like that. What
did Hillary Brooks do all day? Was she a hooker, or what was her day job?
She must have been escorting somebody.
Right. She was hot, way too hot for that show.
Way too hot, yeah. And she would tease them, but never actually fuck them,
Yes.
Which I thought was kind of interesting also. Like, that's a very good question that I never even asked myself. Like, what is she doing?
What is she doing there?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What is Botchakaloop doing? Is he an illegal alien?
Botchakaloop certainly today would be deported. No question about it.
And what about Tiny? What the fuck
Stinky.
was Tiny?
Stinky.
Stinky.
Yeah. Stinky was an actual adult who acted like that was Joe Besser, who became one of the Three Stooges.
Right.
Also.
The reason I loved Abbott and Costello was for the surrealness, which I hadn't taken acid at that point.
Right.
But it precursored lysergic for me as a kid, Larry. I don't know about you, but once I took acid, I could understand Abbott and Costello better.
Yeah, well, the sight gags would sort of break the reality, and they also broke the fourth wall. They would come out in the middle of this adventure, and they would come out in front of the curtain and talk to the audience.
Well, how about the water coming out of the phone?
Yeah,
the payphone in the hall when it starts squirting water in his face.
Alexander 4444. That was the number.
Okay, so your influences are obviously the Stooges and Abbott and Costello, and you mentioned the troika that I happen to agree with of these three guys who couldn't wait to change their names, like you couldn't wait to change your name. Right. Lenny Schneider, Mel Kaminsky, and Alan Koenigsberg.
Right.
All from the neighborhood that I grew up on. I grew up on Avenue K, a couple of doors down from Larry David, 1214 Avenue K. And then I went to PS 99, and then we moved to Sheepshead Bay, where I went to 194. But you describe in the book or in interviews this being the epicenter of comedy, post-World War II comedy, Larry. Maybe you can explain why to the audience.
It was kind of like the Kingston, Jamaica of comedy. It was like this. There's a lot of speculation. I've thought about it a lot over the years. And I've come up with some possible answers, but there's no doubt that it's a kind of a weird phenomena that all these comedians sort of grew out of this one little area of Brooklyn.
Just to interrupt, we were talking about Lenny Bruce, Mel Brooks, and Woody Allen. I'm sorry.
Right.
Just for those at home.
And everybody, every Jew who wanted to be in comedy, who wanted to be in show business, like even Tony Curtis and people like that, and Kirk Douglas, everybody changed their name at that time. That's the way it was, You were not.
But you say you couldn't wait to change your name.
I couldn't wait. Yeah, I was really happy to change my name. And the first time I did it really professionally was when I sold my first joke to Jay Leno at the Comedy Store. And he said, "What's your name?" And that was the first time I went, Larry Charles. And it kind of stuck,
Interesting. What, you remember the joke, or?
The joke was a lame joke, I think, actually. It was something like,
it was only $10 though.
It was only $10 on consignment. He had to go in and get a laugh, and then he would give me the $10.
I had Evan say it on last week, who told me the same thing, selling jokes out front, $50 if it worked, but sometimes nothing if it didn't.
Yeah, $50 would have been good. I was getting 10. I was a discount broker, but the joke was something like, there was a commercial for Delta at the time, Delta, the airline run by professionals. And what do they have in the other airlines? Amateurs, it was something. It was along those lines.
It sounds kind of Carlin-esque.
Yes, it probably was. That's probably what I was thinking, more so. But Jay was really nice in those days, and he's still nice as far as I could tell. But he would actually encourage young writers and young comedians. He was a very inclusive kind of guy. He and Letterman were the kings of the Comedy Store at that time, and Letterman was very hard to approach. He was a very kind of like he had a kind of an aloof sort of stance. So it was very hard to get close to him. But Jay, anybody could talk to Jay. He would engage with anybody.
Hey, come on over, Larry. Come on.
Right. I used to go over to his place, actually, on Olympic. At that time, he had a one-car garage, and he was still working on his cars at that time. So he was a good guy.
I remember when Jerry bought that garage. I used to live on West 83rd in Manhattan, and Jerry bought that whole cockamamie garage between 83rd and Amsterdam for all his cars to stack them up.
I think he still owns that, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
I mean, he's got a lot of cars, as far as I know.
He's got a lot. Well, you weren't a car guy. I mean, but later on, you start getting into racing with him up and down the canyon for some reason.
But I had a Saab.
Oh, he had a Porsche, and you had a Saab.
Yeah, I had a Saab. That's why I always lost every race.
Right.
Because he would give me a head start. I'd be halfway up Laurel Canyon.
You go to Mulholland, and then
by the time we get to Mulholland, we were both like going over the hump of Mulholland, flying in the air. And I was like, boy, if this guy gets killed, how am I going to explain this tomorrow?
Well, you hook up with Larry David at Fridays. You didn't know Larry going in, though. I mean,
no, he was older than me, and I knew nothing about him. I didn't even know he was a comedian until I met him on Fridays.
Right. And this is your first. I mean, you talked about writing for Belzer or David
Steinberg. That's later, though. That's after Fridays.
After Fridays, but Fridays is really your first official writer's room, so to speak, and it is kind of almost a direct rip of SNL. You couldn't get any closer.
Well, we really, if you can imagine, the writers were a bunch of young people. Larry David. The idea of it being a ripoff of SNL was horrific to us, abhorrent to us.
Yeah.
So one of the first things the producers said was, well, why don't you guys come up with the writers? Why don't you guys come up with the name for the show? This is before it was Fridays. And we were all excited, and we wanted to really radically disrupt television. And we came up with all these crazy names, even just like symbols, not even words. We wanted it to really set it apart from Fridays. And then we came into work the next day, and they'd already made the binders and the jackets and the buck cards and everything. And so once we knew they were calling it Fridays, it kind of made us even more determined to come up with radical things, because it was very hard to get out from under the shadow of Saturday Night Live, which, by the way, at that time was probably at its weakest ebb. It had really kind of like fallen quite a bit during.
Okay. Right.
It had like some of the Dick Ebersol had taken over, and the cast was not, the highlight cast that people think of. So it was vulnerable, and we actually did better in the ratings for a while.
Wow.
We could not sustain it for a variety of reasons.
Well, Jack Burns was on that show for some. Was he a writer on it, Jack Burns, or an announcer or
He was
something?
like a producer, showrunner kind of
Jack
person.
Burns is everywhere through comedy history, Larry.
Yes, yes.
I mean, Jack Burns is a weird guy.
Very, very odd fellow.
Yeah.
Very paternal to me. I mean, he was a mentor,
Right.
and I loved him, but he was not loved by everybody. I mean, Larry David had no great affection for him.
Right.
He actually started as a partner with George Carlin in a comedy.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
And Lenny Bruce discovered them. And
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So he has a very interesting pedigree. And then he went from that to be taking over Don Knotts. When Don Knotts left Andy Griffith, he took over as the deputy on the Andy.
Very weird. But he was a radio guy with Carlin up in Boston, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's right. That's right. He really kind of did everything.
Everything.
He wrote for Hee Haw, and he wrote for the Muppets, and he did all.
Wait, doesn't he end up at Arsenio with you?
No.
Oh, he wasn't at Arsenio. Okay, so it's Fridays.
Not that I know of, anyway.
Not that you know of. Right. Okay, so you're at Fridays. You know, by the way, I remember seeing the Fridays had the best musical guests of any of these late night shows. I remember seeing The Clash doing back-to-back songs perfectly, absolutely riveting performance by The Clash on the first season or second season of Fridays.
They were that episode was the episode where I had my first sketch on. It was the third episode. I wrote a sketch called Diner of the Living Dead, which was, you know
what? I saw that. Where they're eating body parts in a diner.
Eating body parts, at the diner. And it was so offensive between that and The Clash. And there was another sketch that this guy, Steve Adams, wrote called Women Who Spit, which was just a talk show with women
who spit.
And they would spit, that the Southern affiliates dropped the show, which I was like, great, fuck them.
Fuck them.
But it really terrified ABC. But we wound up getting a lot of attention because of that episode with The Clash, which was great, and I got to hang out with The Clash also.
Oh, you did? Wow, that's fun.
Yeah, we had like the after parties at Yamashiro's,
right?
And I was smoking spliffs with The Clash. It was like a dream. I was a bellhop before I had this job. You know,
it's insane. I mean, your arc is so crazy. You know, from bellhop to the penthouse. You know, in a span of a couple of years. I mean, it's really wild.
Very lucky in a lot of ways, but I had to deliver the goods, and I was somehow able to do that. So I was very lucky, and I was able to kind of step up when the time.
Was there a sketch? I'm trying to remember the sketch where Jack Burns breaks the fourth wall, comes in, and Andy Kaufman is eating at a table. What was that? Remind me, what was this? That was pretty revolutionary.
Andy Kaufman came on, and he was going to be the guest, and one of the things he wanted to do was to interrupt the sketch and sort of break the fourth wall. So we figured out a sketch that we would do, a simple sketch where he would be able to just sort of stop the sketch. And that was it. That's all the planning.
Go into the bathroom to smoke weed and then come back?
There was two couples, and each person would go into the bathroom and come back and be high. And when it was his time to get up and go to the bathroom to smoke the pot, he said, I can't do it. I can't play high. I can't. This is during the sketch.
Right.
And he's like, I can't do this. And so there was all this awkwardness. And I think for him, that's all he was trying to accomplish.
Of course.
But Jack Burns wanted it to be more revolutionary. So, you know, Michael Richards went out and got the cue cards and threw them at Andy. And then, you know, people started throwing butter at each other.
But the crew wasn't in on it, right, Larry?
The crew was not in on it. The other, except for Michael Richards.
And Jack Burns.
Well, Jack Burns is off camera, right?
Right.
So he's not, Jack Burns is feeling like he wants more action. So Jack Burns himself runs onto the stage and he starts pushing Andy, and they get into a fight. And of course, the crew, who are the most loyal people in the world, crews are the greatest. Yeah. They come rushing on the stage, and they're going to lynch Andy. And so we go to the commercial, and then Jack has to, you know, kind of tell them it's all a joke, you know. So that was, you know, and that got a lot of attention also. That was
what was Andy Kaufman doing in Jerry's Deli out in the Valley?
He was a busboy. He would just do a shift as a busboy. It was a very
on purpose, not for money. I mean,
on purpose, yeah. Right, he would do these conceptual pieces. And one of them was just being a busboy. No business, no jokes, no interaction at all. He would just like take the stuff off your table or bring you water.
For contemporary fans, it's the equivalent of Lana Del Rey working at this Waffle House in Alabama the past couple of years.
Right.
For any kind of cultural reference, Larry, that I could possibly come up with.
That's a good one because
okay. Now you go to Arsenio Hall and you start to read some of his fan mail and you realize that this guy may be in over his head. What did you find in there?
Well, you know, he started off when I got hired, which was after about 7 years of kind of very almost like unemployment after Fridays. I thought that I was going to soar after Fridays,
right?
And realized that I thought Fridays would be a stepping stone, but it was actually a stepping stone down, you know, and I wound up being just out of work for a long time. And finally I got lucky and got onto Arsenio.
Right.
And he wanted to do like really radical humor and like more like Richard Pryor type of humor. And that's what he was into. And once he started doing that kind of stuff, you know, it was like we found out that the audience, that just being a black guy on TV was enough to engender hate.
It was a lightning rod. That was
oh my God. And so he got hate mail, stacks and stacks of hate mail before the internet. And it all was violent, sexual, threatening, crazy, psycho sort of, you know, stuff, sometimes written in crayon. And we had to have metal screeners in the audience so that when people came in, they had to screen them, and they would take weapons off the people coming into the audience. So it was very, and plus we had on NWA and Public Enemy,
right,
radical black groups at that time.
Yeah.
So and so he had to pull back for his own safety, and people tend to think of him as being very mild or middle of the road, but actually he was very cool, and he was in just a very weird, unique position that nobody really understood, and he didn't really talk about. But I thought even though he wound up firing me, I really admired him for sort of like, you know, kind of navigating this treacherous path that he had.
Well, who hasn't fired you at this point? I mean,
that's true.
I mean, you've had such a ceremonious career. However, everyone eventually turns on you for reasons that we'll find out in Comedy Samurai 2, The Retribution, Part 2. Now, you get to Seinfeld because of, I assume, Larry David calls you up. You dance around with Keenan Ivory Wayans for a couple of minutes, and then you decide to go with Larry. Probably the best career move of between the two.
Only an accident because Keenan stood me up for the meeting on a Living Color, and I would have taken that job in a second.
Yeah,
but he stood me up, and it was an accident on his part. And Larry called me almost directly after that happened and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Nothing," you know. And he was like, "Well, we're going to do the show, and we'll do 13 episodes. It'll get canceled. We'll make a little money. We'll go on with our lives." And I was like, "I'm in," you know. And that's how I wound up getting on Seinfeld, you know.
But I mean, there is it's so funny. I dug out a review by an obscure publication called The Hollywood Reporter of the I don't know, May 31st, 1990. It says the show begins with Seinfeld doing what he does, performing on stage, blah blah blah. Why not? Seinfeld has an easy sort of humor, and then it says, but wait, suddenly we're no longer in a comedy club, watching Seinfeld. Now we're in his apartment as he stars as himself in a sitcom. Jason Alexander plays his friend George, currently going through withdrawal after the loss of another girlfriend. Michael Richards is an idiotic neighbor who wants to start a bake-your-own pizza parlor. Julie Louise-Dreyfus, Jerry's ex-girlfriend. And guest star Kevin Dunn plays Joel, a friend who's hanging on to Seinfeld the way a wired-haired terrier grips the mailman's pant leg. Hold on, we're back in the club again. It's obvious Seinfeld and co-creator Larry David are attempting to be creator. Perhaps the effect would have been better if Gary Shandling hadn't done it more effectively years ago. What remains is a group of terrifically talented people who mix but never really mesh. And this is the early review, Larry.
Yeah, no, it got bad reviews. It tested poorly. And the show at that time had not really it hadn't cracked the code yet.
Yeah.
You have two kinds of shows in my observation. You have shows where the pilot is the best show they ever do.
Ever.
And then it goes downhill, and then you have a show like Seinfeld where the pilot might be the worst show. And it builds from there, you know, and you learn from these lessons until it becomes the show it can become. And you have to get lucky for that to happen. The network has to say, okay, we're going to let you stay on the air. They could have easily canceled Seinfeld many times. It was doing so poorly in the ratings. We were losing to Jake and the Fat Man with William Conrad.
Wait a minute. That was a pretty good show. It was Jake and the Fat Man. I mean, everything was in the title. It wasn't complicated.
Right. It was a perfect premise, you know.
I mean, yours should have been Seinfeld and Nasty Friends.
And Bald Friend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So we were losing to Jake and the Fat Man. And it's when the show got moved to after Cheers, which was on that must-see Thursday night thing that they had at that time, that the show really exploded, you know. And also that coincided with the show sort of coalescing. You know, Kramer was coming out as a character, Julia was coming out as a character, and suddenly it was a full, dense, full experience that really made it
so
fun.
Weird, because years later, I lived in Manhattan Plaza, and Kramer actually lived in Manhattan Plaza. I mean,
absolutely.
Totally
I used
surreal.
To Larry, when he lived in Manhattan Plaza.
We all lived in Manhattan Plaza.
Kenny Kramer would come over, you know.
Yeah.
That was all real, you know, but he didn't come over the way Michael Richards did, you know.
Right.
Michael Richards took that character to that next level also.
I've talked to Michael a couple of times. Very introverted guy, Larry.
Very, very antisocial.
Yeah.
Just awkward.
Yeah.
Very awkward guy. Yeah. But when he's on stage,
he's a different guy.
He could unleash. You
know, one of the most brilliant casting things. I wanted to talk to you about the casting of Philip Hall, but also Lawrence Tierney as Elaine's dad. Who came up with that?
Well, I think actually the credit for him coming in might go to Allison Jones, who was Mark Hirschfeld. Sorry.
Okay.
Allison Jones was the Curb casting director, but Mark Hirschfeld was the Seinfeld casting director, and he knew that we were looking for people like Philip Baker Hall or Lawrence Tierney, who were not comedy actors. You know, we wanted serious actors. We thought that was an interesting idea, and so Lawrence Tierney came in. He was rough. He's a rough guy, you know.
He's a rough guy.
Yeah, but he was perfect. We were so intimidated in the casting session that's what we were looking for from Elaine's father, and he got cast, and he wound up intimidating everybody for the week, but did a great job.
Now, you wanted to get Alan Garfield, from what I read, to play the Moyle. And this didn't go well, according to what happened. I mean, I just want to say something. Mark Rydell once told me that Alan Garfield was completely insane. And I don't know if you knew that at the time.
I didn't know.
Bro, he would get his mark. He did a couple of movies with him. One of them was A Crime of the Century. I think it was a Lindbergh kidnapping for HBO. But he would give him his mark, and he would urinate where his mark was to keep other people away from his mark. And I said, come on, Mark, this is insane. And Rydell swore up and down that was Alan Garfield. Now, you had your own story with him.
Well, I mean, I loved Alan Garfield from the Altman movies, and he was a cool actor, and again, not really a comedy person, so to speak. And I thought he would be great for the Moyle, and I actually talked Larry and Jerry into hiring him sight unseen, you know, which we normally did not do. Everybody had to really, you know, audition. He did not have to audition. He came in, he went to the first rehearsal, and he was immediately not following the script. He was improvising. He was like taking the actors through all these acting games. You know, the director had no control over the situation. And eventually Jerry called Larry and said, you and Larry Charles have to come down to the rehearsal space and deal with this. So we went down, Larry, David, and I went down to the stage, and we saw when we walked in, they were all like going in circles and playing these games. And you can see the actors were really like completely like disoriented. They didn't know what was going on. And we went to sit down to watch for a minute. On our chairs, there were two cards. And when we opened the cards, they were like Rosh Hashanah cards from Alan Garfield. It's like, thank you so much for the blessing of casting me on this show. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I don't know how to thank you. And Jerry and Larry come over to me and they go, you have to fire him. We're not doing it. You have to
Okay.
do it.
So
And
the Moyle that you hired was so incredible, Larry.
yeah,
Who was
yeah.
that guy?
His name, I think, was Charles Rosen.
Holy
I
crap.
hope I have that right. He was actually found dead in like a ravine a few years ago, unfortunately. But
Having nothing to do with the episode, though.
no, nothing to do with the episode. And I don't remember seeing him in anything else,
Me
really.
neither. I never saw the guy before or
Yeah,
after.
or after. And he was great. I agree. And he made that episode. I mean, he really had that character down. And that really was a great find after the Alan Garfield debacle.
Now, this was, of course, the baby shower, right, Larry?
No, this was an episode called The Briss.
Oh, the Brits. I'm sorry, take it back.
Yeah.
The Brit, was that all scripted what he was doing, or was there improvisational stuff?
No, it was all scripted. It was very, very scripted. But he was able, as great actors can do, and this is one of the things that Kramer was able to do also, find things in between the lines or action during the lines to make it sort of transcend the lines themselves, you know?
Well, his gesticulations were absurd. I mean, they were just crazy. All his movements were incredible.
Yeah, he was really original. He had a lot of great stuff to bring to it.
What a fantastic episode. Oh, okay, so let me ask something about Joe Davola.
Yes.
I want to know where you got Joe Davola from, because I worked at a magazine called MTV Magazine I published, and I had to deal with a guy at MTV, an executive named Joe Davola.
Yes.
Is that the same guy?
Well, Larry David used his name, yes. So the real Joe Davola was nothing like the guy on the Seinfeld.
Okay.
But it was his name. We would often use people's names, real names,
for no reason at all.
Yes, it was just kind of fun, and most people loved it. I think Joe Davola loved it also. Bob Sacamano, who was a friend of mine, who was an unseen character for years on the show, he was unhappy, actually. Of all the people, he was
It's
really
so
unhappy.
weird. It's so weird. What did he care?
It wound up ending our friendship, actually.
What?
And I guess sort of nowadays I think back and I think, well, here's a guy, he's going into a hotel, he's going to check in. He says, I'm Bob Sacamano. And they go, yeah, right. You know.
You are. Oh,
and,
my God.
So, well, whatever it was, he got angry at me about that, actually. But he was the only one that ever really had a problem. And so Joe Davola wasn't anything like, he was a kind of a mellow guy, actually. He wasn't anything like Peter Crombie, who played the Joe Davola character.
Peter Crombie was insane. That guy was a psycho.
Yeah, he was great. Also great. We had great casting, really. With Mark Hirschfeld was the casting director. Great casting was a kind of an unknown quantity on that show. Mark Hirschfeld always brought great people, and those people wound up really defining those roles to the point that we're still talking about it 35 years later, you know?
It still holds up. I mean, one thing I found fascinating was that you would call up these writers at home who were sending in spec scripts and try to help them.
Yes. Well, I didn't know any better. I wanted to treat people the way I wished I had been treated.
Right.
So I was given the job of reading all the spec scripts, of which they started to really pile up. And they would come not through agents, just people sending them in. Yeah. And I didn't know any of the protocol for that stuff. So I'd read the script and I go, wow, this is not very good. But, you know, I'll call the guy in Alaska sometimes and like say, hey, I'm Larry Charles. I work on Seinfeld. I read your script. They would be freaked out that I even
They would be flabbergasted by that. Yeah. I mean,
and it was great. I would go over the script with them, and they really, really appreciated it. And so there was a human connection to all this, you know. So
all I ever got was a nice letter from Peter Melman.
If you were lucky you got that. Well, at a certain point, I was stopped. They told me not to do it anymore because a guy finally did sue us. Who said that we took an idea, which we didn't. We didn't need to take anybody's idea, and also, if we liked an idea, we would buy it, you know. Right. But they said no, you can't. It has to come through an agent and all that kind of stuff. That sort of changed that. It was very hard to find writers for Seinfeld.
Well, you were doing most of it in house, as Peter explained in his letter to me. Which I mean, I knew Jeff Melman, his brother, so it was just some connection to Peter. But I mean, he wrote me a very nice letter. But I wish you would have gotten it instead. I would have appreciated the phone call.
Yeah, a little earlier, and it would have been me.
Yeah. I mean, this is a couple of years later. Okay, so you're staying there, you're doing this, you got supervisor, producer credits, you're moving up the ranks. At some point, you leave the show. Now,
Yes.
why do you leave this incredibly successful operation? Is this some sort of living on the edge, Larry Charles, dangerously part of your DNA, bro?
Yeah, I would say it really was. I had reached the point, the show is successful, but I had reached the wall, a creative wall. I couldn't think of any more George story. I was just kind of burnt
Yeah.
on the premise of Seinfeld, and I had done a lot of episodes. And I thought, I need to like try something else. I, excuse me, I never was concerned about the future or security or my career or anything like that. I didn't worry about money. I just didn't think about stuff like that. And I wanted a new challenge. I'm a gambler, and I wanted to roll the dice and see what else I could do now. Now that I had this foundation. And
Well,
so,
as it says in your book, Peter Farrelly referred to you as a cross between Charles Manson and Jerry Garcia.
right.
So maybe that explains you by Peter Farrelly, one of the craziest guys in the
Yes,
business.
yes. Great guy. And yeah, I thought that was a very accurate description at the time.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
yeah.
Where do you go from here? From Seinfeld, you go to Mad About You, or
Go to Mad About You, because Mad About You was not, Seinfeld was all about being the funniest show on TV.
ever?
And I thought we had accomplished that,
Yeah.
really. And the show was starting to change a little bit. They were hiring other writers. It was becoming a little bit more bourgeois. I liked that. I missed that working class kind of like struggling thing. And so I was looking for another challenge. And Mad About You was about a married couple who were like in bliss. And I really didn't like the show that much at that point, because it's like, this doesn't resemble my marriage at all,
Right.
And I thought, what if I brought some of the elements from my marriage to this relationship, a darker hue to this show? And Paul and Helen were really into it. They wanted to have a struggling relationship that almost falls apart. And I wrote like a two.
We should point out to the audience two things. One, you're a showrunner now for Mad
Yes.
About You, and
Right.
two, your entire family life and marriage is in complete fucking meltdown.
Right, exactly. And so I was able to take that meltdown and kind of channel it into Mad About You to a large degree.
Can I ask you a
And
question? Why did you have 25 dogs?
my wife was like a very obsessive person, my first wife, and she took my daughter to the pound for her birthday. She wanted to get a puppy, and my wife wasn't really even into dogs, but she came back to the pound like a changed person, and suddenly she became involved in the rescue movement.
Wow.
And we had a big house at that time in Bel Air.
This is in Bel Air, La?
Yeah, in Bel Air. And we started fostering dogs, and she couldn't stop, really. So,
Holy crap.
so she kept bringing dogs, and they all got adopted eventually. But we had like at least 25 dogs. After I left, it went up to like 40. But
What?
it was such chaos. I was stepping in dog shit like
Oh
every.
my
It was like
God.
Ozzy Osbourne. I'd get out of bed and I'd step into dog shit.
Right.
But
God rest his soul.
yes, exactly. But I appreciated the fact that she was trying to rescue these dogs also. And I felt guilty about how much our marriage was kind of falling apart in the midst of all this. So that's how we wound up with 25 dogs.
But you're implementing this into the Mad About You character arc that you're creating for Paul and Helen.
Yeah.
And you explain to them where this is eventually going, the entire arc, I presume.
Yes, I wrote an outline that kind of outlined the two seasons where they were basically falling apart. They separate, and then eventually it winds up with them getting back together and her getting pregnant. But
she's becoming a big star at this time too, Larry, right? I mean, she
won the Emmy both years that I was there. But she
this
also
is Helen
won
Hunt, by the way. Go
Helen
ahead.
Hunt. She also won the Oscar. She was in Twister, which was a big hit and kind of made her a movie star. And then she did As Good as It Gets, and she wound up winning the Oscar and the Emmy for Mad About You, the Oscar for that movie and the Emmy that year. So yes, she was like on a roll that was amazing. But she was great. She still is great.
Wasn't her dad directing some of the episodes?
Her dad was Gordon Hunt, who directed quite a few of the episodes. Yeah, really good guy. And that, again, I had this dream of directing. And on Mad About You, there were 4 directors who each had a different style, but I was able to, as a showrunner, really watch how they deal with directing, and I learned.
You're learning it on the job.
Yes. So I got very lucky that the 4 directors were really cool directors: David Steinberg, Tommy Schlamme, and Gordon and Michael Lembeck.
Michael Lembeck, who played Abby Hoffman at one point in something, if I remember correctly, because I had an Abby Hoffman script and they went to Lembeck. It was supposed to be Eric Bogosian originally and Dustin Hoffman, but I remember Lembeck was either in a theater production or something of the Chicago 7.
Very possible. And his dad was Harvey Lembeck, who was Eric Von Zipper in the Beach Party movies.
What a weird link. And Tommy Schlamme, I hired him to direct Mambo Mouth that I produced for HBO with Leguizamo.
Tommy Schlamme.
And he came in with a multi-camera thing that blew everybody's fucking mind, Larry.
Yeah, he was like, we were lucky to get him. He was still kind of it was early in his career, and he was already breaking all the rules. He used to take the camera, put it on his shoulder. He was inside the set, very anti-sitcom directing. And he wound up doing Newsnight and doing West Wing and things like Mambo Mouth, which was great. And I'm a big fan of John Leguizamo. And, those kind of things, he was like a great director who at first was just doing freelance, TV stuff,
Wow, that's real. I remember being up at his house in Woodstock. Was he married to Christine Lottie?
Yeah, he was married to
Christine. I don't even know why I was there. It's one weekend or something early on in the 90s. Okay, so at some point, you, as everybody does, you meet Eddie Gorodetsky.
Right. How do you avoid it?
Which everybody has to at some point.
It's the law.
So you meet Eddie Gorodetsky on a plane. And,
literally on a plane, yeah. I'm on a plane with Larry David. We're going to New York, where it's a hiatus from Seinfeld. And Eddie is on the plane. And Larry knew Eddie like everybody did. But I didn't know Eddie at that time. And so Eddie came over to say hello to Larry. And Eddie and I started talking about music. And Larry immediately got bored and said, "Why don't you two guys sit together? I'm going to go sit somewhere else." And he left and sat in the back of the plane or something. And Eddie sat down and he had his CD box that he would carry around with him. Yeah. And he opened it up and there was a lot of Bob Dylan in there, And I was like, "Oh, we talked about Bob Dylan." And he said, "Yeah, I'm best friends with Bob Dylan's manager." And I said, "That's weird. When I was a kid, I had a cousin and my mother always told me that he went on to become Bob Dylan's manager, and he said, "What's his name?" Jeff Rosen. That was the guy. So
you say there's no God, Larry Charles.
Exactly.
You say there's no God.
How
do you explain that?
Well, my whole so-called career is based
him trying to tell you he exists.
Yes, it's these synchronicities.
And you saying, "Go fuck yourself." I don't believe.
Yeah, you're right. I'm gonna rethink that after I'm done.
No, you better rethink it because he's throwing you all these life preservers.
I know, you're right.
It's so bizarre, bro.
Yeah, that is so true.
Gorodetsky turns you on to Jeff Rosen, who's Dylan's manager.
And I become really close. I haven't seen Jeff since I'm about 5 years old. Literally.
Oh, wow. Oh, weird.
My grandfather and his grandmother had a feud, and they didn't talk for all those years. So we were not allowed to talk to them. My mother wasn't allowed to talk to them. So
silent scorn is part of our religion.
Oh, yeah. So it went on for decades and decades. And they lived next door to each other, by the way, on Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn. They lived in the next two houses, So I didn't see them I didn't see Jeff from the time I was about 5 years old. And so now he's an adult and he is Bob Dylan's manager. And we start hanging out and we have so much in common, and we become very, very close. And one of the things with Jeff was never talk about Bob, unless he brings up Bob, you don't talk. He needs his own identity, and I respected that, and we became very close because he's into literature and music, and he's a very cultured person, and we had a lot to talk about besides Bob. But Bob would call, and he'd get off the phone and just deal with Bob,
We had, just to interject, we had Jesse. I had Jesse as an intern when we were going to NYU at National Lampoon, and Bob would call and Ratso would have to deal with Bob when he called on the phone. Same thing.
Yeah, Ratso's one of those people also that has that weird connection with Bob. So, at some point after a couple of years of me just being friends with Jeff and having dinner and whatever, and our mothers also reunited through all of this as well.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it was great. And he called me to say, hey, Bob's been on the bus and he's got a VHS machine and he's been watching these Jerry Lewis movies. And he was thinking about doing like a comedy show,
Oh, come on.
and would you be interested in going to talk to him about this? And I
No,
was
I'm
like,
busy. I can't possibly do that.
right. I said, of course, and I thought to myself, I'll go to this meeting. I'll meet Bob once and I can go to all my friends and say, hey, I met Bob Dylan, and here's the story of my meeting Bob Dylan. That would be it, And so I went to the meeting. It was at his coffee house in Santa Monica. And
Well, him and Victor Maymudis.
right. He wasn't there though. No, in
But
fact,
maybe his daughter was there. I think she might have been running it at some point. Or
well, there were people behind the counter.
right. Because they had a big falling out, is why I mentioned that.
Right. I don't know too much about that, actually. I'd be curious.
That's a separate, interesting story.
Right,
But go on.
I'm sure it is. A lot of interesting stories like that.
Yeah.
I sat down, and I was at that time wearing pajamas.
Of course. Now, the first day you wore pajamas, I meant to ask you this. You wake up and you say, you know what? Today is Tuesday. I got to go into the set. Maybe I'm directing. I don't really fucking know. But I'm going to wear pajamas. Tell me that day, like why, how, or where does that start?
Well, it started with me wearing like either the pajama tops or the pajama bottoms with jeans or pants or a regular shirt. And then one day I was like, I was like overwhelmed at this time in my life. I really was getting bad at making decisions outside of my show decisions, my creative decisions. I couldn't handle it. I was having a lot of I was having like kind of a breakdown, really. And so one of the things that I was able to do was like take that choice away. And one day I just I can't decide what shirt, what pants. I'll just wear both parts of the pajamas.
So it's kind of like a mental patient, Larry. That's why they have those uniforms for them.
Exactly. And I didn't think of it that way. I thought, well, this is kind of practical. I don't have to make a decision. I could just put the pajamas on. And they weren't good pajamas like, what Hugh Hefner was wearing. They were like
satin or silk.
Yeah, they were JCPenney cotton pajamas, And
Did you wear sneakers with them?
I wore sneakers. I was wearing Converse at that time for the most part.
Right.
And I had really long hair and a really long beard, and that became my uniform, And so I was able to take away at least one decision from my day because I could just wear pajamas. And I started wearing them, and I was mostly living in a bubble at that time because I was working on these shows and I was working 7 days a week, and I never had any time off. So I was always at the stage or the studio or in my office. And so it didn't seem that weird to me, and everybody sort of indulged me also. And it wasn't until I started to go out more and go to a restaurant or something that I realized, wait a minute, I'm wearing, it was almost like it came out.
But it's Hollywood, so nobody really gives a shit. If you've got money and you're going out, what do they care what you're wearing?
They really didn't care. And I was successful also, which is also the eccentricity is kind of accepted. But when I started to become self-conscious about it after a few years of doing it. And I finally was like, wow, why am I wearing pajamas?
Wait, how long did it last? Like a couple of years?
Oh, yeah, it definitely lasted.
Oh, yeah, I thought so. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, a few years. It lasted a few years for sure. And then I eventually evolved out of it to more just raggedy, shitty clothes, which is pretty much how I dress today.
So you had one of the most famous pitch meetings of all time in my world. Or what I would say is when you take Dylan to HBO for the HBO comedy pitch, and he's just staring out the window into oblivion.
Yeah.
And maybe you could tell us a little bit about that pitch.
Well, talking to him, I had to talk him into the meeting, first of all, because he doesn't normally go to those kind of meetings. I said, if you go to the meeting, we'll definitely sell the show. They're not going to say no to you. So he said, okay. And I showed up in my pajamas, and he showed up he looked like a villain in a B Western. He had on a big black hat and a long black leather duster and boots of Spanish leather and the whole thing. And we went to the meeting, and I remember walking down the aisle of HBO with all the assistants just staring at us like, who the fuck are these two guys? And then Chris Albrecht was at the end of the hallway.
Oh, yeah.
And he opened the door, and he was so excited to see Bob. And he's like, Bob, it's so great to meet you. Look at my wall here. I've got tickets. I've got the original tickets from Woodstock. And Bob just turned in that moment and just went, I didn't play Woodstock. And
Oh,
Chris and the rest of us, me and Jeff Rosen and Gavin Pallone, who was my manager at the time, the three of us looked at each other like, oh shit.
right,
And Bob walked past Chris, never said another word to him, walked to the other end of his office, which was gigantic,
right.
and had these floor to ceiling windows that overlooked the city. And he just stared out the window for the rest of the meeting, never turned around, never said anything. Occasionally I would go, is that right, Bob? And he'd go, yeah. And that was it.
Wow.
And
Wow.
but at the same time, Chris
Go ahead.
actually bought the show in the room, which
Why
is
not?
very unusual,
Yeah.
And by the time we left and we walked back out to the elevator, by the time we got to the elevator, Bob said, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right. That's how long it took.
Yeah.
So
so
you didn't even push the button. He's already out of the
right.
picture.
We did not push the button yet, and he was already soured on it.
But this leads to another incredible mitzvah, is you working with Bob 12 hours a day on some cockamamie script that
Right.
turns out to be Masked and Anonymous, which probably starts out as Ronaldo and Clara 2, The Reckoning.
Well, we took the remnants of what we liked what he liked from the comedy script, and we started to just kind of layer it and start from scratch. And that was like another year of writing. And again, Gavin, my manager, said, you know, when he said no, he didn't want to do it anymore. Gavin said to me, you got to get out of here. You got to quit this. This is crazy. And I was like, look, I'm on the Bob Dylan train.
Yeah. Once you're on that train.
Yeah, I'm taking this to the last stop. You know, we'll see where it goes. And we wound up making a movie together. And he doesn't collaborate with that many people in his life. And so I felt very lucky to like have this kind of long, deep collaboration with him where we wrote for a year and then we made a movie together. You know, it was a very special time, actually, as it turned out.
I mean, the fact that you're going to that coffee shop every day to work 12 hours in some little room filled with smoke.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an insane movie by itself. I mean, just the two of you in there with no food or water or bathroom breaks every freaking day. I mean, Larry, that must have been insane. I mean, what was going through your mind? Every once in a while, you must have said to yourself, I can't believe I'm sitting here with Bob Dylan writing this cockamamie script.
Constantly thinking to myself, I can't believe that I'm doing this, both for the better and for the worse. I mean, it was usually a positive thing. I mean, I actually was with him, you know, every day, you know, and we would just kind of connect and we had a good time. We would laugh and, you know, we were like, you know, he was amazed at the process of the screenwriting, you know.
Right, of course. So it was new to him creatively.
Yeah, but it was very similar really to the way he wrote songs, which is layering all this stuff together and almost letting the audience have the unconscious connection, you know, let them make the connection in a way. So it was
there's two things I wanted to ask you. You found a box of his little snippets of dialogue or scenes or whatever the hell's in that box. What did you make of it and how did you incorporate it?
Well, he had this beautiful embossed box, and that's one of the first things he said to me was he opened the box and he dumped out all these scraps of paper and he said, I don't know what to do with this. And so I would pick up a piece of paper and it would have it was just like lines and thoughts and things like that. It wasn't anything really. It was just like thoughts of Bob Dylan. And one thing would say like Uncle Sweetheart. And I would say, well, that could be a character's name, you know?
Yeah.
And then I would take another piece of paper and have a line on it, you know? And I go, this could be a line of his dialogue. And he was like, you could do that? And I was like, yeah, why not? Why can't we do that? You know? And that's what we wound up doing. And that's how we wound up kind of building the script from those shreds of paper, which were from all over the world, by the way.
Oh, really? And on different kinds of paper?
Yeah, from stationery in hotels in Norway and all kinds of weird stuff. But he saved it all, and he would never let me take it home. Right. I always had to transcribe it.
Wow.
Yeah, I always had to transcribe, and then I could take that home. But I was never allowed to take any property of his with me. You know, I had to leave everything behind.
All of my insights come from, obviously, from Ratso, who I worked with. I mean, many of the insights onto Bob come from Larry. But also from my old friend Tony Garnier, who became the band leader after a while. So I've known Tony going back, you know, to his Sleep at the Wheel days, and everything I've learned from Bob about Bob is from Ratso and Tony.
Tony was Tony. Hopefully, he's well and doing okay. I think he's still playing with them.
Yes,
But
absolutely. Yeah.
he was a great guy. They had a really Bob had a great band at that time. There was Tony. There was George Rasile.
Right.
There was Charlie Sexton.
Larry
and
Campbell or
Larry Campbell.
Larry Campbell, yeah.
And they were really sweet guys. And Tony was the sweetest of all, really. I really loved the band and got to hang out with them a lot while we shot, because we shot a lot of music.
Right. And you shot it live, Larry, right?
We shot it all live. We shot about 22 songs, most of which did not get into the movie that people have seen. The original cut had much more of the music, but that got cut down from 3.5 hours to 110 minutes. And
let me ask you something. How did you raise the $4 million for that movie? I mean, what was that based on, that budget?
Not well. We had to get all these movie stars to be in it. Just
right.
You know, they would say, "Well, Bob Dylan's never been in a hit movie," so it's like it's Bob Dylan. But they were like, "Well, he never been in a hit movie. We're not giving you any money. But if you can get Jeff Bridges, if you can get
which you do, you describe going out to visit Jeff Bridges and looking at his ashtrays."
Yeah, right. I was hoping that there would be like roaches in the ashtray and we would get high together. You know, the Big Lebowski, I was like so thrilled, but no, every ashtray was clean. So, but he eventually agreed to do it. And he was somebody who was able to generate enough revenue. People felt that they would put a little money. I mean, you think about $4 million for that cast, it's almost nothing, you know.
You had Jessica Lange in there. You had John Goodman, who's fantastic. Luke Wilson,
Penelope Cruz,
Penelope Cruz.
Yeah, Ed Harris, Cheech Marin was in it.
Cheech Marin,
Chris Penn, and Christian Slater, and
Christian Slater.
There's a lot.
I don't know how many people love that movie, but I do, because it has the European sensibilities that I love so much. I understand it may not have generated a lot of box office, but some of those locations are insane. The old Griffith Park Zoo, the Masonic Temple on Wilshire.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us how you put that together.
Well, that's, I wanted to create like a third world America, and in Los Angeles, though. And so fortunately, Los Angeles, as we both know, is always in the process of falling apart. And so the zoo, the old zoo, we use the old zoo. We use an old train tunnel that now is actually, a lot of these things aren't even there anymore.
Right.
The Masonic Temple is still there. So that's still there. But I had lived in Los Angeles long enough to have a sense in my mind of these locations to use for this movie, you know. And so I was able to take the location manager to the places that I wanted to shoot. And it was no problem securing those locations because nobody else wanted to shoot.
Nobody cared. But
right.
Tell me about the jacket, because it reminds me of the episode with Scorsese and Larry David and the jacket that ends up in Goodwill.
Yeah. Well, he had a wardrobe person who made.
This is Bob Dylan, the star of
Dylan. He had I wanted him to look like a Mexican cowboy in a Mexican Western, you know.
Which he does.
Yeah, and the wardrobe person handmade all of his wardrobe. So they were beautiful, one of a kind. He had a couple of different suits, and they were beautiful. And the first day of shooting, he came out of the trailer in that jacket. That's the jacket right there.
Right. Oh, that's the jacket. But
that is the jacket. Wow. And I said, wow, that is such a cool jacket. Now we just have to go make a double of it, you know, so we can, in case anything happens to the jacket, we have a second jacket, which is the way it works in movies, you know. And the wardrobe lady went, "What are you, stupid? I mean, this is a one of a kind jacket. This fabric is like antique fabric. You can't make a second version of this jacket." So after that, I was like, oh my God, if anything happens to this jacket, the whole movie's ruined, you know. And he has to get into a fight, and he has like some physical stuff. So I became obsessed with the jacket through the whole. As much as I was obsessed with everything else, I was obsessed with that jacket, because if he ruins that jacket, he would like eat fried chicken, or he would like smoke a cigar, and I would take it away from him constantly. He wouldn't spill it all over the fucking jacket, you know? And,
oh my God.
Yeah, so I had to really worry about that. And
now what about his acting chops, Larry? Did he have any acting skills whatsoever?
Well, he's Bob Dylan, and he has the persona. You know, and what he didn't know was like how to hit a mark. He didn't think about peeing on the mark the way Alan Garfield did.
It would have helped. It would have helped.
It might have helped. He didn't know about that stuff. So what I would do is have the stand-in do the scene with the other actors, like with Jeff Bridges, and have Bob watch. And then Bob would just copy what the stand-in would do. And that's how he learned how we block the scenes, basically.
So it's almost like you're putting on a mini rehearsal for him to see that mini movie.
Yes, I had to do that. Well, he would have some very weird ideas. Like at one time, he wanted to do the whole movie in dance. He wanted it to all be in dance, and it's like we don't have the time to choreograph an entire movie. You know, we can't.
Why not, man? Everything's never been done before, Larry.
And then at one point, he wanted to use an accent, and I was like, "What? What are you doing with the accent? It's like just talk the way you talk, please." And so I would have to have these kind of conversations with him, or he'd be in a scene like with John Goodman and Jessica Lange, and he'd have lines in the scene, but he'd be watching them, and he was so into them that he'd forget he was in the scene, and it would be his cue, and he would just sit there like waiting for them to keep talking, and he was so into the scene he forgot that he was in the scene.
Did you have to feed him lines through a headset, or he memorized them?
He memorized the lines, but what he did have in his ear the first couple of days was an earwig with music blasting in it.
That's helpful.
And I at first, the first shot of the first day was this big crane shot, and I'm hearing music coming through my headphones, and I'm like, "Where's that music coming from?" And we had to send the whole crew out to find out where the music was coming from. And meanwhile, they couldn't find it. And meanwhile, I see Bob is standing there. This is the first day, first shot, and he's already getting antsy. So I go down, I get off the crane, I go up to him, and as I'm walking towards him, I hear the music coming out of him. And I'm like, "Oh my God, he's like a savant." The music.
He's a human jukebox.
Yes, and then I realized that he had this earwig. And there was a guy in the parking lot in a teepee who was like this DJ who was DJing music for him.
Oh my God!
And I was like, "You can't do that. You can't even hear yourself think." And he's like, "Johnny Depp told me to do it." And I was like, "Johnny Depp did not tell you to do that."
Yes, he did, Larry. Johnny Depp told me, bro.
Yeah, and
How dare you?
I went out to the teepee and I told the guy to turn it off. I had to actually literally run out myself to the teepee and say, turn off the music, And
there's a guy in there DJing in the teepee.
Yes, Johnny Depp's DJ.
Johnny Depp's DJ is in a teepee for one customer, for one.
That's right.
One person in the audience.
He's hired just to provide music for Bob's earwig. And so I had to stop that also. Years later, by the way, I found, because I said Johnny Depp might do music in between takes or something, but he's not doing it while he's acting.
Right, he got that wrong. He got that mixed up.
He was.
What?
Johnny Depp would have music playing in his ear.
Well, that explains a lot. That explains a lot of Johnny Depp performances.
Yeah.
Now, what happens to this movie? How much damage did it do to your career, in your humble opinion?
Well, first of all, I made minimum, right? I made minimum on this movie, but they came to me, the producers, and said, because the script was 155 pages, which is long for a screenplay. They said, if you want to make this entire movie, you have to kick back your salary.
That's nice.
So I made zero on the movie.
Right.
I literally worked for all these years and I made no money. So people think I'm very rich, but I go for years without making money.
Because of Gavin Polone and your incredible management. And I've never seen a man have more hostile agents and managers than Larry Charles.
Yeah, I've had some conflicts with my agents and managers.
Conflicts. I think it's beyond the point of conflicts, Larry.
Yeah, so that was the first problem. The second problem was we got accepted to Sundance as the centerpiece premiere.
Wow.
And Roger Ebert at that time was the king of Sundance. And he used to like to come and take pictures of himself with all the stars. So he came backstage before the movie was going to premiere, and he took pictures. I had to take the pictures, actually, of him with Jessica and him with John Goodman and him with all the stars. Val Kilmer, and there was so many people in that movie.
Val was in there. Val's thing was great.
Val was great, and Mickey Rourke also. Let's not forget
Mickey Rourke. Oh, fuck, I forgot. You're driving around with him and his dog all day, Loki.
Yes, exactly.
Going shopping and shit.
Yes, we had to go shopping with Loki. And they were great. I loved them both, by the way. They're really, I wound up having great affection.
Is the wrestler? How great is the wrestler, Larry?
The wrestler's great. And Mickey Rourke is great. And
Right.
and Val was great also. You know, he had his own thing, but he was really like a most charming person you could ever possibly meet.
Yeah.
So the Sundance, we're taking the pictures for Roger Ebert, and then he's got all the pictures except for Bob. And he's like, I'd like to get a picture with Bob. And so Bob was outside smoking a cigarette, and that he was wearing this weird wig. And I went outside. I said, hey, Bob, Roger wants to take a picture with you. And he's like, I don't want to take any pictures. And I was like, well, you know, he just go inside and take a fucking picture with the guy.
I'm not into it, Larry. Just not into it, man.
I'm not into it. Yeah, exactly. So I had to go back to Roger Ebert and go, Bob, say, you know, he's not going to take the picture. And Roger Ebert got really, really pissed. He was really angry. And then he went immediately from there to watching the movie, and he wrote the most scathing review of the movie that you could.
What a bitter ball! What a nasty bitter ball!
Yeah, and that got the movie off to a really stumbling start. You know?
Yeah,
it like bombed. It basically bombed at Sundance, you know, and and so then after that, it was basically a bomb. You know, it was like a literal bomb, and it killed my directing career completely. At that time, I was able to go back to Curb, thank goodness, and go back to directing Curb.
Okay, so you go back to directing Curb, and you now are literally a professional director who's directed cinema now. So, I mean, how does that work for you? Do you have to alter your style? Do you have to get into this Larry David improvisational directing thing? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I was, by that time, I only had directed one episode of Curb before I did Master Anonymous. So I was still like learning on the job. And I actually did the storyboards for Master Anonymous. I drew every storyboard myself, but I tried to also improvise as much as I could around the lines. And Bob wanted to make sure all the lines were said, which they were, but I would also allow people like some space in between, you know, to play a little bit. And so then I was able to go back. I became much better at dealing with actors. I was much better technically. You know, I learned a lot from doing the movie.
Wait, did you share a guild writing credit with him as a pseudonym or something?
Yes, we shared the writing credit. Yeah.
As Renee Fontaine?
He was Renee Fontaine. And
who were you?
It wasn't fair, really, because he had his name all set up.
Right.
He's like, well, let's not use our real names. Let's just use pseudonyms. Right. I'll be Renee Fontaine. He had that immediately like that.
Yeah.
I had to come up with something right away. And so I just said, and I don't know where it came from. I said, Sergei Petrov, you know, and those are the names on the screenplay.
That's hysterical.
We had to get special permission from the Writers Guild.
Well, apparently the Directors Guild didn't mind that you gave up your entire salary. They backed you up 100% on that, I assume.
Right. I didn't get much support from anybody about that.
From anybody. All right, so you're back at Curb, and you're doing your thing. I want to know.
I only have a few more minutes, by the way. I gotta get going in a couple of minutes.
Okay,
you can do this again if you want.
We'll do it again. We'll go to part 2.
Yeah.
But just tell me how it worked with with Richard Lewis. How you had to search him for notes and everything else that he might have in his pockets.
Yeah, it took him a while to get comfortable with the process. So one of the things that he did to protect himself, because he is such a brilliant joke writer, is that he would write joke. He would get his part of the outline, so he knew what he was going to be doing to some degree in terms of the action, and then he would basically write out for himself jokes that he could use during the scenes. And for a while, he got away with it. And then we started to get suspect and realize, wow, he's too ready with his lines. You know, it doesn't spontaneous. It sounds rehearsed. And eventually it went into his pocket, and then there was a piece of paper with the jokes. And we took it away. I think I actually crumbled the paper up just to show him he's not going to have this anymore, and threw it away. And that, in a weird way, liberated him, and he became the Richard Lewis everybody loved on the show, because he wasn't just being real. Because the honest Richard Lewis was the best version of Richard Lewis.
Absolutely.
Well, he was a very sweet person also who I miss.
Me too. We were pretty close. We used to go to Dodger games all the time together.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
I would wear my Dodger uniform, and he would say he couldn't go with me dressed in a Dodger uniform, and he's wearing a fucking black cape and MC
Right.
Hammer pants, Larry. So I mean,
Right, I
had to go
remember.
with that freaky dude.
We
All right, look,
all have our uniforms, Mark.
everybody's got a uniform, and you've got another gig to do. Why don't we come back another time and pick it up at Borat, Dictator, and from there, the second half of the book, Larry, because obviously,
I would love to.
can we do that? Can we book you again and we'll figure out a time to
I had
come
a
back? I know
great
you got
time.
something to do.
I had a great time. This was really a lot of fun. I'll be happy to come back and continue talking. We could talk about anything you want, really. So,
All right, we'll have some more time to spread out.
yeah, it was great, man. It was really great to meet you and do the show. And thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Charles one time.
Right.
Give it up for Larry Charles. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yes,
we
sir.
will talk soon.
Okay, Bubby.
Okay, Matt.
Well, that was interesting. Holy crap. I had to let him go because it's been an hour and a half and he had a limited time here, but we're going to bring him back for another 2 hours in a couple of weeks. Grandpa, thank you for the super sticker. Absolutely. The amount of material, I guess, cannot be covered in one episode with Larry Charles. So we're going to have to bring him back to get into Borat and to get into Religulous with Bill Maher, to get into the Robert Redford movie he did, the script he wrote, A Walk in the Woods, the Nick Cage movie he did, Army of One. If Dottie French wants me to, I'll definitely do that. And of course, Bruno. We got to do a whole show on Bruno and the Dictator, and that's going to be an entire episode by itself. So I don't think we could have covered it all today anyway, regardless of the amount of time we would have had. I've been trying to get Larry to do this for a while, but as you can imagine, he's very busy. This book, which again, showing up here now, Comedy Samurai, is one of the best Hollywood memoirs ever written. And as I thought, there's going to be a second one because none of the stuff can fit in the first one. And like he said, it was extremely long and they cut it down. But, you know, if you want to see the work of Larry Charles, look at the baby shower, the trip, the opera, the fix up, the subway, some of the more classic Seinfelds. And then he will go into where maybe we can pick it up next time at when he goes in to save and be part of Entourage with Jeremy Piven and that whole crew at HBO, and get into Borat and the Bear and Azamat, and how the casting of Azamat from Borat is worth the price of admission. So I think in a couple of weeks, we're going to have him back. Next week, I'm going to do a deep dive on George Carlin as a performer. Lock, stock, and barrel on George Carlin next Wednesday. Just me and George Carlin, who's no longer alive. But after that, I've got Jackie the Joke Man coming up with all of his stuff on Howard Stern. Jackie, an old friend, I reached out to him when they pulled the plug on Howard. And Jackie's got, not only knows where the bodies are buried, he also has documented evidence of his time on the show, which is going to shock people in 2 weeks. So next Wednesday, George Carlin, with the secret life of George Carlin, is we're doing an entire series now on the secret life of various people. And I mean the secret life, not the regular bio stuff. I mean, we're going to do the secret life of Hollywood Henderson, the secret life of Sam Kinison, the secret life of people that are comedians that you may not have known about their secret life. Jackie Mason, we're going to do one. Let me just see here. Secret Life of Richard Lewis. Thank you, Bob Tranquilli, 9985 super sticker. We're going to do the secret life of Jonathan Winters. I mean, these are people who, despite people thinking they know them, do not know them and have an incredible dark side. So I figured I'd do a series, and eventually we're going to get to some really, we're going to do Andy Kaufman, like I said. That's why I was mentioning Andy Kaufman to Larry Charles, whose real name is Larry Charles Winograd, by the way, for anybody at home. Let me see if there's any comments here that make any sense. Bob, a great show. Dottie, did I miss Howard Stern? Yeah, Howard Stern was on this afternoon. You missed Howard Stern. Um, one guy asked me on Twitter, how do I listen to the show? Where should I listen to the show? So I said, probably in your living room would be a good place to listen to the show. But I wanted to get into uh, just to talk about this coffee for a second. This, first of all, this coffee, I don't know, it has a picture of it on the screen. This is the best coffee I've ever had. This Western Highlands coffee that has been sent to me in a bag by Anton, the king of all Biltong. The coffee is a zesty fragrance of dry cocoa notes, blah, blah, blah. Perfectly balanced cup of premium PNG. This stuff is like freaking gold. Whether it espresso, cappuccino, or plunger, which I don't use, you will enjoy the hand-selected, perfectly roasted bean. Let me tell you something. Try this stuff. I swear, this is unfreaking believable. And I hate anything usually than the stuff, Folgers roasted coffee. I have now switched to Western Highlands Tribal Coffee, and it is just absolutely delicious. He sends it to you either ground or in bean form, and you get 10% off with that secret code. Don't tell anybody, please. And he'll send you a bag of this. Try one bag. I guarantee you'll come back for more. I don't know if David Crosby used to wear a cape or not, but Richard Lewis certainly did. And I would take him to the Dodger game in his cape and his black Zorro wardrobe. At one point, his wife said to me, "Why? Maybe you can help me change his outfits." And he wouldn't buckle. He just had stuff from the '80s. But yeah, tribal coffee. I really recommend it. It smells great. It's delicious. Again, I think there might be a connection down in Papua New Guinea. Oh yeah, it's from the volcanic soils of the Western Highlands province of Papua New Guinea, and they had to kill off a bunch of pygmies to get the coffee because it was a battle to the death with these guys. They wouldn't give up the coffee, and if you do get the Biltong, he throws in these incredibly precious freestanding care floss devices to get any of it out of your teeth. That comes with it. Again, the book is Comedy Samurai, Larry Charles. You can order it on Amazon. You will not be able to put it down. One of the great show business memoirs of all time, the Carlin Files. I don't know about the files, but we're going to do The Secret Life of George Carlin. If people want to subscribe to the show, I am not going to stand in your way. There's a way to subscribe where you either push a button or something that, here it is, like and subscribe. Somehow it's already starting to take off despite my amateur production schedule here. Yeah, like and subscribe. You can follow me on X, but you can like it and subscribe here to the channel. And I don't think it costs you anything to do that, but the subscription numbers will help me. The reason it's important, it'll help me get bigger show business guests. And because simply to explain it, it's not the guy I'm trying to get on the show who looks at these numbers, but his handlers. And I can't get the people I want to get because the handler will look at the subscription number and say, fuck it. Larry, we kind of have mutual friends in common, and we cut through the middleman. But the middleman in the Larry case tried to not help us, a publicist for the book, or couldn't care less. So I had to go around him. But the real key is to subscribe to the channel, and there I getting the numbers, which doesn't really help monetarily. It does help to convince people that it's worthy to come on the show blind, not knowing what they're getting into. As far as it took you so long to meet up. Yeah, it's kind of weird. The same thing happens with Larry and Rick Rubin, where they seem to be overlapping, and with Eddie Gordetsky. A Gilbert show, we're going to do a Gilbert show, obviously. That goes without saying. Larry actually punched up Problem Child 2, which starred Gilbert. We could talk about that the next time he's on. Cold Iron Bound. Yeah, if you see the movie Masked and Anonymous, it's got, I think, 5 Dylan songs played live with Tony Garnier. That unit that Tony Garnier is still running with Larry Campbell. I don't think Larry Campbell's playing guitar, or he might be. I don't know who's playing with Dylan now on guitar, but he did have G.E. Smith at one point, and then Larry Campbell, then Charlie Sexton, and everybody knows the drill. Eventually, we're going to get into a deep dive on Dylan, a deep dive on Lenny Bruce, but we're building up to that. I'm not the best judge of coffee. I don't know if I'm the best judge of coffee, but try this coffee, Big Mouth, and see if you like it. I'm not saying I am a gourmet coffee person at all. I'm just saying the coffee will speak for itself. I don't have to sell this coffee. It will. If you try this, you'll see what I mean. I am not a gourmet biltong person nor a gourmet coffee person. I'm just telling you what I like. If you don't believe me, that's cool too. But both of these products, and I hate everything. Both of these products are A+ products, and I'm glad to have them as a sponsor of the show. But that being said, I wouldn't put anything on here that I thought sucked because I have to live with it. But anyways, what time is it? It's 1:45. Yeah, it's almost a couple hours. I think that's all you're going to get for free. I recommend seeing the episode The Briss, and seeing Entourage, and of course the greatest comedy ever made, which is Borat. We'll be on with Eric on Friday for Freeform Friday about the news, which is making its own sauce. You don't really have to do anything. We basically have too many stories to cover, and it's only twice a week, which is all I have time for, to be honest with you. But anyway, I think that may be a wrap for today. An hour and 50 minutes is about as good as it's going to get, because I have to watch the Dodger game, and I have to study the team and the lineup and everything else. We're really in a free fall now. I mean, we got the Padres coming up this weekend, and we're tied for first. We had a 9-game lead. It's like 1951 again with the Giants. That we've been caught by the Padres after a 9-game lead. We're now in a deadlock with them, and it's not looking good. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. It's been a lot of fun with Larry today. We're going to bring Larry back, like I said, in a few weeks. And tell your friends to subscribe to the show, because that might help also. That's the only thing I could think of. Or pass it on to friends who want to find out about show business, which is what we're going to try to cover here and have like a political free zone, simply because we need a safe space. Okay. We have a little exit music at this point, I think, to get us out of this show. Maestro.